The house on Willow Lane was too quiet. Silence pressed against the walls, broken only by the sound of Helen Carver's frantic footsteps as she climbed the stairs two at a time. She called their names once, softly, almost playfully at first. When no reply came, her voice rose louder, sharper, as if volume itself could summon them. She reached the doorway of the small upstairs bedroom and froze. The beds were empty. The blanket still carried the faint impression of small bodies, and when she touched the fabric, it was warm. For one surreal moment, she told herself they must be hiding, perhaps in the closet, giggling behind the doors. She yanked it open. Nothing. Her throat tightened. The window was unlocked. Curtains stirred faintly in the night air. Helen staggered back and shouted, her voice breaking in panic. "Daniel, call someone, please, they're gone." Her teenage son thundered up the stairs, eyes wide as he looked into the hollow space where his sisters should have been. His hand trembled against the doorframe. Maybe they just... He stopped, unable to finish. Minutes later, red and blue lights washed across the street. Uniformed officers filled the hallway, their radios crackling. Questions came rapidly and cold. When did you last see them? Was the window usually unlocked? Did anyone hear a car? Helen answered in fragments, her voice collapsing under the weight of each word. She clutched the bedpost, her nails digging into the wood. Daniel hovered at her side, pale, silent, and burning with something between fear and guilt. As if his very presence should have prevented the absence of theirs. Outside, the neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering beneath porch lights. Some shook their heads with pity. Others whispered darker things about careless parents, about secrets behind tidy curtains. Rumors like smoke began to spread before the night was even over. Inside, the search stretched past midnight. Officers combed through the backyard, flashed lights into the woods, and canvassed door to door. No shoe prints, no broken branches, no tire tracks, nothing. The only trace of the girls was the lingering warmth on the mattresses, fading with each passing hour. At 3 a.m., an officer returned to the room, scanning it one more time. His flashlight beam lingered on the wallpaper. Childish drawings taped to the wall, stars and hearts in bright crayon. He leaned closer to the nightstand. Something faint, almost invisible, had been scratched into the wood. He ran his thumb across it but said nothing. He simply noted it in silence, then clicked off his light. By dawn, the house was a hollow shell of exhaustion. Helen sat slumped in the living room. Daniel curled in a corner chair, his eyes open but far away. The girls' bedroom door upstairs had been shut by the police, sealed as a scene of evidence. The town would awaken to headlines and speculation. But inside the Carver home, all that remained was absence, an empty room, cooling sheets, and a single unanswered question carved into wood. 15 years passed, and still the night of the disappearance clung to Willow Lane like a stain no season could wash away. The Carver house sat in quiet disrepair, its shutters crooked, its windows dulled by dust. Most people avoided walking past it, but Daniel never moved away. He stayed in town, orbiting the hollow place his sisters left behind. The case had long since gone cold. Detectives retired, files grew brittle, and each anniversary was marked only by a few sympathetic headlines in the local paper. Neighbors spoke less now, though glances still lingered on Helen Carver when she walked to the store as if the tragedy had seeped into her skin. She aged in silence, her face lined not just by years but by the unrelenting ache of unanswered questions. Daniel was 30 now, a man in form but still carrying the raw weight of a brother, who had once stood frozen in the doorway of an empty room. He kept a box of newspaper clippings under his bed, each headline a wound he couldn't stop reopening. Nights often ended with him staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail he could remember: the unlocked window, the curtain swaying, his mother's broken voice. It was on a gray October morning when the phone call came. Daniel almost let it go to voicemail, but something in the unfamiliar number made him answer. "Mr. Carver?" The voice was tentative, female, carrying the kind of hesitation that hinted at secrets long kept. "I'm calling about your family's old house." Daniel straightened in his chair. "What about it?" The new owners were renovating. "They found something lodged behind a drawer in the upstairs bedroom. I think it belonged to your sisters." A silence stretched so long that the caller repeated herself as if afraid he hadn't heard. But Daniel had heard every word. His chest tightened with a pulse of dread and fragile hope. By evening, he was back inside the house he had avoided for years. Dust rose from the floorboards, the air stale with abandonment. In the bedroom, where the wallpaper still bore faint outlines where drawings once hung, a small object lay on the dresser. It was a diary. Faded, its cover cracked, but undeniably theirs. A childish sticker peeled at the corner, 2 stars overlapping. Daniel reached for it with trembling hands. The leather felt brittle, as though it might dissolve if he pressed too hard. He opened to the first page, his heart pounding with the weight of a truth buried for 15 years. But just as his eyes met the words, a shadow moved behind him in the hallway, soft, fleeting, gone before he turned. Daniel lingered in the doorway before forcing himself to return to the dresser. The diary lay open, waiting, its first page lined with uneven handwriting, girlish loops, some letters backward as if rushed in secret. The words pulled him instantly back to the nights when his sisters whispered after lights out, their voices like threads only they could weave. He came to the window again. The entry began. We weren't supposed to talk to him, but Anna says he understands us better than anyone. I think he's dangerous, but she says I'm being dramatic. I don't want Mom to know. If she knew, she'd never forgive us, Daniel's breath caught. His sisters had been 10 and 12 years old. Who could they have been writing about? He scanned the next entry, dated just 2 days later. We promised to keep it between us. No one can find out. He said he'll take us somewhere better. Somewhere people listen. Daniel closed the book for a moment, pressing it against his chest. The room tilted around him. Outside, the October wind rattled against the shutters, sounding too much like fingernails scratching to be a coincidence. He whispered aloud, as if speaking might steady him. Who were you talking about? Who was at the window? The silence answered. The following pages held drawings, messy sketches of stars, a car with shaded windows, a pair of eyes underlined twice. The handwriting shifted between the 2 sisters, Anna's confident scrawl tangled with Emily's smaller, hesitant script. One note chilled him most. If anyone finds this, it means we couldn't get away. Daniel turned the page too quickly, the paper threatening to tear. More fragments appeared, promises of escape, warnings not to trust someone close, and always the initials scrawled at the edge of sentences, J.R. The letters were repeated, sometimes circled, other times scratched over as if regret had followed every mention. He mouthed them silently, testing the sound, J.R. The name meant nothing to him, not yet. The final entry ended mid-sentence, the ink trailing off in a jagged line. Tonight, he said, we have to decide. Anna thinks it's love. I think it's nothing more. Daniel slammed the diary shut, his pulse racing. His sisters had been in contact with someone, maybe lured, maybe taken, but by who? And why hadn't the police found this when the room was first searched? He looked toward the hallway where he thought he had seen movement earlier. Shadows pooled in the corners, innocent in daylight but predatory now. For a moment, Daniel was certain he wasn't alone. He forced himself to leave the house with the diary pressed under his arm. Outside, the night air was sharp, but it didn't clear the suffocating thought that grew heavier with each step. If J.R. had been watching the girls then, could he still be watching? The initials wouldn't leave his mind. Daniel lay awake until dawn, the diary on the nightstand like an accusation. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw those looping letters, J.R., and the unfinished sentence that cut off before the truth could be named. By mid-morning, he forced himself to act. He drove to the county records office, a low brick building that smelled of paper and mildew. He asked for access to archived police reports from 2008, his voice steady though his palms sweated. The clerk raised an eyebrow. Cold case? My sisters, Daniel said flatly. That was enough. Hours passed in a haze of paper. He flipped through witness statements, patrol notes, and neighborhood canvas logs. Pages blurred until his eyes caught a detail he'd never known. A neighbor had reported seeing a man smoking near the Carver house weeks before the disappearance. Late at night, leaning on a dark sedan. The report noted only initials scribbled in the margin. J.R. Daniel's stomach dropped. Whoever his sisters had written about hadn't been imaginary. He had been seen. He left the building into the weak afternoon light, gripping the photocopied page so tightly it wrinkled. His mind churned with possibilities. A teacher? A neighbor? Someone tied to his parents? That night, Daniel returned to the old house, unable to stay away. He stood in the backyard where the grass had grown tall and unkempt. The bedroom window above him gaped like a wound. He imagined a figure standing exactly where he was now, cigarette glowing, whispering promises through the screen. The thought made him shudder. A twig cracked. Daniel spun around. Across the alley, a man lingered in the shadows, face obscured by the hood of his jacket. For a moment, Daniel thought the stranger was watching him. Then a car passed, headlights sweeping across the figure, and the man turned away, walking briskly until he vanished between houses. Daniel's pulse thundered. Coincidence or something more? He couldn't tell. Back inside, he opened the diary again. On one page, Emily had drawn a crude sketch of a ring with initials engraved inside. He traced the faint pencil lines, realizing it was meant to be a clue. JR wore something she noticed. He wanted to hurl the diary across the room, but he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Who were you, JR?" "Why them?" The silence did not answer, only deepened. Sleep was impossible. He spent the night combing online records, old yearbooks, property deeds, public directories. Dozens of names surfaced, but one froze him. James Rowe, a man who had lived just 3 streets over in 2008. Arrested years later for solicitation, charges dropped quietly. His last known address, unknown. Daniel leaned back, the glow of the screen casting his face in hollow light. He had a name now, a trail, but the question that clawed at him was worse. If James Rowe had been circling them then, had he ever really left? Daniel sat hunched over his kitchen table, the diary spread open beneath the dull yellow light. Pages turned slowly, each one heavier than the last. The handwriting had grown sharper, more hurried. His sister's voices no longer blended, they were diverging. "Anna says we have to keep the promise," Emily wrote in her cautious hand. "She trusts him. She says he loves her. I don't think she understands what that means. I told her it's wrong, but she just smiles at me like I'm too young to know." Daniel's jaw tightened. Anna had been only 12. Old enough to believe in love stories, too young to see the teeth hidden inside them. A week later, Anna's entry appeared. "Emily is scared of everything. She wants to tell Mom, but if she does, he'll never forgive us. She doesn't get it. He's the only one who listens. We can't break our pact. We promised." The word pact was underlined 3 times. Daniel read on, his throat tightening. The entries grew more fragmented. One girl pleading for silence, the other desperate for freedom. They argued through ink, their voices etched on fragile paper. The love that once made them inseparable was being poisoned from within. Then came a chilling entry from Emily. "I told her I'd tell anyway. She cried and begged me not to. She said if I ruined everything, she'd never forgive me. I don't want to lose her. But I can't sleep anymore." He watches from the yard. "Sometimes I think Anna lets him." Daniel pushed the diary away, his chair scraping against the floor. The idea that his sister, his bright, protective Anna, might have opened that window willingly made his stomach turn. But something else gnawed at him. On the margin of the same page, faintly pressed as though written and then erased, was a line barely visible. "If I don't write again, it's because she chose him over me." The words looked smudged, hurried, as if Emily herself had been uncertain whether to confess them. Daniel stared at the page, pulse hammering in his temples. Could Anna have betrayed her own sister? Or had Emily, terrified, imagined shadows where none existed? The diary gave no clear answer. The next entry was weeks later, sudden, abrupt, with no explanation for the missing days. Daniel leaned back, the silence of his apartment thick around him. Somewhere in those lost pages something had happened, something neither sister had wanted to write down. And if Anna had chosen silence, then what else had she chosen? By the time Daniel closed the diary again, his chest felt hollow, scraped clean of air. The pages were no longer enough. He needed voices, people who had lived through that night, people who might still remember details the police had ignored. He started with Mrs. Lacey, the neighbor who had lived directly across the street in 2008. She answered her door slowly, her hair now silver, her face mapped with years. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You're Helen's boy," she murmured, ushering him in. "I wondered if you'd ever come back here." Daniel wasted no time. "Do you remember anything strange from that summer? Anyone around the house?" Her hands tightened on the armrest of her chair. "There was a car," she said softly. "Dark blue, always parked a few houses down. I saw a man sitting inside once, smoking. Thought it was odd, but we all thought odd things back then." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Do you remember his name? Did anyone know him?" Mrs. Lacey shook her head. Only that your father spoke to him once. Out front. I saw it from the window. After that, the car stopped coming around. The words struck like a blow. His father had spoken to the man? Why had that never been in the reports? Daniel left her house with the air colder against his skin than before. He sought out others. The retired mailman, a shopkeeper, even a former patrol officer who had since taken to drinking before noon. Each offered scraps, raised voices at the Carver home, a shadow by the window, a police search that ended too quickly. One memory chilled him most. A boy from the neighborhood, now grown, remembered sneaking through the woods that summer. He swore he'd seen one of the sisters there at dusk, Anna, he thought, talking to someone in hushed, urgent tones. She didn't look scared, he said, frowning. She looked guilty, like she was hiding something. The image burrowed into Daniel's mind. Guilty. That word carried more weight than frightened ever could. By nightfall, Daniel sat alone in his car outside the old house, the diary on the passenger seat. He replayed what he had gathered, a man in a dark car, initials carved into memory, his father's unexplained conversation, Anna's possible betrayal. Pieces didn't align, they tangled, forming knots instead of clarity. But one thing was certain, too many people had seen something. Too many voices had been left unheard. Daniel looked up at the house, its windows black like watching eyes. A shiver crawled down his spine. He had come seeking answers, but the more he uncovered, the more it seemed the truth wasn't buried outside the family at all. For the first time, he wondered, not who had taken his sisters, but who might have let them go. It took 3 sleepless nights for Daniel to work up the nerve to find him. James Rowe's name wasn't easy to track. Just a handful of old records, a mugshot with hollow eyes and whispers on internet forums. Eventually, Daniel learned he was living 2 towns over in a rundown boarding house near the railroad tracks. The building reeked of smoke and damp concrete. Daniel's pulse thundered as he climbed the narrow staircase, the diary clutched inside his jacket like a shield. When the door opened, he nearly faltered. James Rowe was older now, heavier, his hair graying at the edges. But his eyes, the eyes Daniel remembered from the grainy photo, were the same. Cold, assessing, faintly amused. Rowe leaned against the door frame. I wondered when one of you would come knocking. Daniel's voice cracked with rage. You knew my sisters, a smirk. Everyone knew your sisters. Sweet girls. Too sweet for that house. Daniel shoved the diary forward, flipping it open to a page marked with J.R. They wrote about you. About promises. About... His words snagged on fury. Where are they? For a moment, Rowe only stared. Then he laughed low and rough. You think I killed them? No. I never laid a hand on them. They came to me. The words hung heavy. Daniel's stomach turned. They were children. Children who wanted out, Rowe countered, his voice smooth but edged with venom. Your sister, Anna, she was clever. She saw things. She wanted freedom to be heard. She hated how your mother looked at her like a burden. She told me things I'd never repeat. Daniel's hands trembled. Stop. I never forced them, Rowe said, leaning closer. If anything, I protected them. They wanted to leave and I was their escape. But then one of them, Emily, I think, lost her courage. She wanted to tell. That's when it all fell apart. Daniel's throat tightened. What did you do? I told them to choose, Rowe whispered. His smile was thin, cruel. And they did. The words struck like glass shattering inside Daniel's chest. He staggered back, his mind spinning. Did Rowe mean Anna had chosen him? Had Emily been left behind? Or was this all manipulation, a sick game to torment him further? Daniel wanted to scream, to strike, but Rowe only leaned against the door unbothered. You'll never know the full truth. Not from me. Ask your mother. She knows more than she ever told the police. The door slammed shut, leaving Daniel in the hallway, shaking, fury burning his vision red. He stumbled outside into the night air, his body vibrating with questions that refused to settle. If Rowe had spoken the truth, even a fragment of it, then betrayal hadn't ended with him. It had begun inside the Carver family itself. Daniel drove straight from Rowe's boarding house to his mother's home, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. Rowe's final words, ask your mother, echoed louder than the hum of the tires. By the time he reached her door, his rage had curdled into something colder, fear. Helen Carver looked older than her years, Her body diminished, her eyes sunken. She opened the door slowly, recognition flickering like a candle about to die. "Daniel," she whispered, stepping back to let him in. "You shouldn't come here so late." He followed her into the living room where the air smelled of dust and faint lavender. The silence between them pressed heavily until he finally snapped. "What did you keep from me? From the police? What did you hide?" Helen's face drained of color. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She sank into the sofa, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater as if trying to wring the truth out of herself. "Mom," Daniel said, kneeling in front of her, his voice cracking. "Ro told me you knew more, that you had proof." Her shoulders began to shake. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "I found notes," she whispered. "In their room. Slipped under the mattress. Letters, drawings. I should have given them to the police, but I didn't." Daniel's chest tightened. "Why?" Her sob was sharp, raw. "Because I couldn't bear the shame. Do you understand? They wrote about him. About sneaking out. About love. People already blamed me. If the world knew, they would have said I let it happen. That it was my fault." Daniel's nails dug into his palms. "So you burned them?" Helen nodded, shaking uncontrollably. "The night they vanished. I destroyed everything. I thought I was protecting them, protecting us. But when they never came back..." Her voice broke into silence. Daniel stared at her, his pulse roaring in his ears. The weight of 15 years pressed down, heavier than ever. His mother had silenced the only voices that could have told the truth. He wanted to rage, but when he looked at her, fragile, broken, his fury curdled into despair. "You could have saved them," he whispered. Helen turned away, curling into herself. "There's more," she murmured, so soft he almost didn't hear. Daniel leaned closer, heart pounding. "More what?" But she only closed her eyes, retreating behind her tears, refusing to finish the sentence. The room filled with suffocating silence, the kind that left Daniel with no choice but to dig deeper. Alone. Daniel left his mother's house in a daze, the night pressing heavily against his skin. Her unfinished words clung to him like a curse. "There's more." But she would not speak it. She had buried her truth as deeply as the girls themselves had been buried by time. Back in his apartment, the diary sat on the table, waiting. He opened it with trembling hands, flipping through the familiar pages, the fragments of arguments, the desperate pleas. He had read them a dozen times, but tonight he searched differently. He searched for what wasn't there. The binding creaked as he pressed the book flat. That was when he noticed it. A seam slightly uneven, as though the spine had been tampered with. His heart lurched. Slowly, carefully, he worked his fingers along the gap until a thin piece of folded paper slid free, yellowed and fragile. His breath caught. It was a note, not written in Emily's hesitant hand nor Anna's confident scrawl, but a frantic mix of both. Lines crossing, words jumbled as if written in terror. "If anyone finds this, it means he lied. It means we can't trust him anymore. We thought he loved us, but he only wants to take us away. Don't believe anything he says." It wasn't just him. Someone here helped him, someone we trusted. Daniel's eyes blurred with tears. The words burned into him. Someone here helped him. His thoughts spiraled. His mother? No, her guilt was suffocating but passive, cowardly. Then who? His father, already gone in death, is unreachable? Or someone else inside the family circle? Someone who had always been there that night, silent, watching. He stared at the note again, searching for more. At the bottom, 2 faint letters scratched almost into invisibility. DC Daniel froze. His heart stuttered in his chest. Those were his initials. His hands shook so violently that the paper nearly slipped from his grasp. "No," he whispered aloud, as though denial could rewrite the ink. "No, it's not me. It can't be me," but doubt swelled inside him. He had been 16 then, a boy already awake that night. Could Anna or Emily have written in confusion, believing he was part of it? Or had someone else, Ro, his father, convinced them that Daniel himself was complicit? The room tilted around him. Every memory from that night replayed in jagged fragments. His mother screaming, the warm sheets, the carved initials on the nightstand. Had he missed something? Had he forgotten something? Daniel pressed the note flat on the table, staring until the letters blurred. There was only one certainty left. The truth wasn't finished. If DC meant him, then the diary wasn't just a record of his sister's fear. It was an accusation, and if it didn't mean him, then someone else had used his name, his shadow, to cover their tracks. Either way, the diary was clear. Betrayal had come from within the house. The note lay on the table like a verdict. Daniel barely slept, the words DC pulsing in his head, branding him with doubt. By morning, he knew what he had to do. He drove to the police station, diary in hand, the folded note tucked into the back. Detective Rowe was waiting as if he had known Daniel would return. His tired eyes softened when he saw the diary. "You found something." Daniel slid the note across the desk. Rowe read in silence, his jaw tightening. "This changes things," he muttered. Then he looked up. "Or maybe it confirms what I already suspected." Daniel stiffened. "What do you mean?" Rowe tapped the initials at the bottom. "You think it points to you. But this isn't your handwriting. It's theirs. They were trying to warn someone, maybe even you, about another DC." Daniel's pulse thundered. "Another DC? There isn't one." Rowe leaned back, the weight of years heavy on his face. "There was. David Callahan. Your father's business partner. He lived 2 streets away. Always at the house. Always trusted." The name hit Daniel like a blade. He remembered David, a tall man with easy smiles who slipped into their kitchen unannounced, who sometimes stayed late whispering with his mother. He had dismissed those memories as ordinary, but now they curdled with menace. Rowe continued, his voice low. "He vanished a week after the girls did. Packed up, disappeared. We never had enough to link him. But this," he tapped the note, "this is the first direct mention." Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. "So my mother—" Rowe didn't answer immediately. His silence was answer enough. That evening, Daniel confronted her one last time. She sat by the window, cigarette burning low, eyes hollowed out by decades of secrets. "David Callahan," Daniel said. "It was him, wasn't it?" Her hand trembled, ash spilling onto the carpet. She didn't look at him when she whispered, "I thought I could protect them. I thought if I stayed quiet, they'd come back. But he promised things your father didn't know." Her voice broke. By the time I understood, it was too late. Daniel's chest constricted. "You let him near them." Tears streaked her face, raw and unguarded. "I thought I was saving us. I only destroyed us." For a long time, neither spoke. The weight of betrayal filled the room like smoke, choking, inescapable. That night, Daniel returned the diary to the police, leaving it in Rowe's hands. Whether justice could still be found after 15 years was uncertain. Callahan was gone. The sisters were gone. What remained was truth, and its cost. As he walked out into the night, Daniel felt the ache of finality. The truth had not freed him. It had branded him. His family was ash, his past a wound that would never heal. Behind him, the station light flickered. Somewhere in the silence, he thought he heard his sister's laughter, faint as memory, swallowed by the dark. 15 years had passed since Anna and Emily disappeared. Yet their absence still cast a shadow over the small town. The diary, once dismissed as a child's private thoughts, became the final testimony of 2 voices silenced before they could grow old. The police reopened the case, but David Callahan was never found. Some said he changed his name, fled the country, and built a new life where no one knew his sins. Others whispered he was buried in unmarked ground, his secrets rotting with him. Justice, like the sisters, remained missing. Their mother lived in quiet exile, rarely leaving her home. The neighbors stopped asking questions. Pity had curdled into contempt. She carried her guilt like a shroud, her window always glowing late into the night. Daniel never returned to that house. The diary stayed with the police, but its words had burned into him. Sometimes when he dreamed, he saw the scrawled letters DC on the walls, accusing, unfinished. He woke with his heart hammering, unsure if the warning had ever truly been solved. In documentaries, people often search for closure. But in this story, closure was a myth. The sisters' truth came too late, their voices preserved only in ink and fear. What lingered was not justice, but a reminder. Betrayal often hides closest to home, and sometimes the worst monsters are not strangers in the dark, but the ones we let in through the door.